It's time for Trench Talk, where Joe Rogan meets metal and heavy underground music. I'm your host, FlightOfIcarus with MetalTrenches.com. As always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, and hit up our Patreon if you want to support us financially and feel like you're really getting some value added from this podcast.
So you already started, right? You want to start? You do your pitch?
Yeah, all right. So I've got the recording started. I'm here with Charlie Fell again, from Lord Mantis.
Charlie Fell again. I didn't fall down again. It's my second appearance is you know.
That's right.
Sorry, it just always sounds funny when sometimes the name thing, you know, man. Like you can't say my name on top of a mountain.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, anyways, I'm here with Charlie Fell from Lord Mantis and Cobalt, and I don't know if you can announce the thing that you just told me, too, and to add on to that list.
Well, yeah, man, I mean, it hasn't been like an official announcement, and I don't think there will be, just because it's not that kind of a band, but yeah, I will be doing drums for Today's a Day.
Which is fucking wicked, man.
yeah, dude, it's one of my favorite bands ever, you know, like, I am more than stoked, man, you know, like, me and Steve been friends for a long time. I met him when we first toured with Lord Mantis Today's Day, which is actually funny enough. The tour, I got kicked out of my own band on that tour. But me and Steve kind of bonded. Can I tell the story? It's quick. It's only take a couple minutes, but it's a funny story.
Go for it.
Basically, it was around Halloween time when we were playing a show in Salem, Mass. And we had Ken couldn't make it on guitar, so we had this dude Yegor from Toronto fill in on a recommendation from the guys from Panzerfaust. So he was kind of, I was trying to make him feel comfortable with all of us because, he didn't really know us that well and everything. So I figured, hey, Yegor, let's do some mushrooms, man. That'll be a good bonding experience,
Why not?
Yeah. And so we ate a bunch of mushrooms, and we, no cooler place than Halloween time in Salem, Mass, And I had like this orange devil mask, or it was like a skull mask that I was just walking around everywhere in Salem with this mask on at night, and I had this candle lit. I remember thinking if the candle goes out, then something bad's gonna. I can't insult the spirits by letting the candle go out. We're walking through these graveyards and stuff, and I felt like I needed to make an offering. So when I got back to the place we're staying, I was telling everybody, I'm like, "Hey, I got an announcement. I'm gonna offer my pinky to the gods tonight. If anyone wants to help me in this endeavor, that'd be great." So we, no one believed me I was going to do it, and I'm like, okay, you bet your booty I'm doing it. So we all got some ice, started icing my index finger, to cut it off. And I got the knife out, and I was starting to cut. I had the first slice. I remember it was like a bread knife, And I pulled it back really hard to do one cut, and I was like, oh wow, that really hurts. And Steve comes, says, what the hell are you doing, man? You're on tour, you play bass, dude. And he was upstairs sleeping, and wakes up to this, and he stopped the show right there. It was like, no, you can't cut, dude. You're not in the race today, man. Don't cut your finger off. You don't want to do this, Charlie. So if it hadn't been for Steve jumping in on that, I probably would have cut my finger off that night.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't. That might have been a problem.
We've been friends since then, and we always see each other when he comes to town. He'll stay at my place, whenever. And, man, I got a tremendous amount of respect for that guy. I think there's a lot of bands that came from Today's the Day that he doesn't get the credit he deserves, man.
Yeah.
And he's a hard-working guy, man. It's just, it sucks, It's how it goes, though,
Well, I'm happy for you. I'm glad you're keeping busy, and I can't wait to hear all this fucking new music that's going to be coming down the pipe at some point.
Well, it's all in the works, man. And hey, it's after 10 years, more than 10 years of being a heroin addict, and to all its faults and all its flaws, for me, the thing that worked was the Methadone program, right? it's tried and true. And I think do you know the stats on like the success rate for methadone? I think it's higher than all the other ones. I know that.
Yeah, I don't know them off the top of my head, but I mean, all of these, anything that has like a chemical support portion to it now, which really is the big thing beyond just methadone, that they're working on all these different medications for like opioid addiction and stuff. It's definitely showing some promising results.
Yeah, like, but it's like it's the gold standard pretty much, you know, and people are reluctant to try it like I was because of all the hoops you have to jump through, which is really like, you know, what, you know, like the methadone program's been built on. It was Richard Nixon started it to lower crime rate in New York City. You know, I don't know if you know that, but I read a whole article about how that, you know, was the reason why there's so many hoops and stuff to go through. It was to keep people local, to keep them from running around everywhere causing crime and stuff.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, neither am I. You know, it's fucked up because when you look at the drug laws, in almost every single drug and every kind of like rule around it, that's always what you find. Some kind of racial law, you know what I mean? Or something that started like, oh, we made this illegal because the Mexicans did this and we need to, you know, discourage people from doing stuff that's in their culture, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they even, I was listening to somebody talk about how the word marijuana used to be like, I'm probably fucking this up, but like it was just Mexican slang for like tobacco. But then when they pulled the whole like reefer madness switcheroo because they were freaking out about like hemp and utilizing hemp for things, they like repurposed the name for marijuana and like created this whole mass freak out over it. I don't know. Like there's all sorts of weird shit like that historically.
It sounds
like,
more Mexican too. That's part of the reason they used it, you know, is they wanted to associate it with,
make it
like,
sound
you know,
foreign and scary and
exactly, man. It's all bullshit, you know, basically. And like, you know, I think that's also like a part of a side effect of capitalism in a way too, man. Like, because branding is like and marketing is like an American fucking pastime now. You know what I mean? It's just as much as baseball. And like, you think about sensationalizing everything, right? Like even the weather. Like when it says 30% chance of rain, it really means we don't know if it's going to rain or not.
Yeah, we don't fucking know.
But we're going to say 30% chance because if we say 0% chance and it rains, then we're wrong. And if we say 10% chance, well, that's just not interesting to read. So let's put it at 30% because then we have a little sensationalism in it. Ooh, it might storm. It might get crazy out. You know, watch our channel, see what's going to happen. You know, it's like, I don't need the weather to be a cliffhanger episode. You know what I mean? But that's what we have. You know, it's
I never thought about it that way.
It's bananas.
Yeah.
And that thinking, though, goes through everything and into, like, our healthcare system, which is supposed to be helping us, you know, like, it's still based around profit, which is why we have the methadone program, which could be curing people left and right, and people like me could have gone to way earlier instead of having suffering through 10 years of addiction.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like I waited because I know I play in touring bands and I am not gonna be able to tour while on this, which I have to figure out now because like now I've gotten back into shape, you know, like my stamina's up, I'm drumming again like crazy.
That's great.
And now that the methadone's worked and my life's together, now I'm stuck with this addiction to methadone. Now I'm stuck with these chemical handcuffs down, and I'm pissed off. You know, and it's like, where do I go from here?
Yeah, it's not a perfect fix. I mean, now you kind of need a fix for the fix, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly, man. So, and then you just end up, basically, what does that teach? Well, that just teaches you to stay on drugs for everything. Drugs will fix everything, you know? And it's like, you know, I think what happens with I can't think of a medication that doctors actually wean you off of slowly. Because when I was, you know, when this all started, in my early 20s, it was because I had back problems and I was on pain medication. And when, you know, if you're on for a long time, the doctors don't tell you what's going to happen to you. They don't tell you that, like, you're going to go through terrible withdrawals and all the shit.
Yeah.
That's just, like, you to find out for yourself. And it's basically up to you to wean yourself off. Now, with methadone, if you don't have the opportunity to really wean yourself off with a dose that you have at home, good fucking luck. It makes it pretty hard to do it, because that's how people naturally get off things is at home. They say, well, I'll take one less today. I'll take a little less today. And then slowly they stop taking it as needed, and it's just like what happens when there's a hurricane, what happens when there's a net, you know what I mean? Like, it sucks the amount of stress it puts on people, like, beyond in that program, like getting to that place every single day is the same as thinking, how am I going to get that $200, $100 to, like, maintain my habit today? You know what I'm saying, man?
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're in this whole, again, the opioid crisis is just that. Like, we got all these people fucking hooked on this shit now. It's a mess.
Yeah, but, like, I think also, man, people don't think about this, too, is, like, it's all these people who are emotionally numb out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What's the consequences of that? I know that when you're like that, when you're numb, you can't see how you're behaving at all, right?
Yeah.
And you end up doing a bunch of really selfish shit and, like, eventually pushing friends away. Like, I have a friend that's going through it right now, man, and it's someone who watched me go through all my stuff, so it's, like, it's very upsetting to see them be like, dude, you just saw me struggle for years. Like, how can you possibly think that was a good idea,
Well, it's also like watching a mirror image of yourself, too, and being like, man, seeing this from the outside, I see how painful it was for probably people to see me doing this, too, and it sucks.
No, exactly, dude. I could see how I was acting now because I'm watching, this person do the same things that I'm like, oh, shit, I guess I was acting like that, like, when you're numb, too, you think you're going to, like, it's not that you think you're smarter than everybody else, but you think that people aren't paying attention to the reading between the lines of your behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you'll do real self-serving things and plot little actions that, I'm thinking we'll do it this, and it's like I'm thinking I'll do it this way, and they won't realize why I'm thinking I'll do this thing this way, but they are knowing, oh, I see why. Your friends being like, what a jerk. Why couldn't they just talk to me instead of planning this, like, weird thing this way so it helps them? You know what I mean? Like, it's just all this underhanded shit that ends up happening. And it's, I don't know, man. I think it's underlining all the shit going on politically is this opioid crisis and this numbness. And it's just a really dark cloud that highlights all the other darkness going on right now. And when you know the signs and what to look for, man, it's really overwhelming how, like, at a fever pitch this shit is, Like, I mean, you said you're a counselor, right?
Yeah.
So, the signs to look for, like how to tell when people are high and all that stuff and, like, the behaviors and stuff. And it's like, like, you could see it, like, underneath all the other shit that's going on, that people just want to get out, It's like being attacked from all angles, and people are just dipping out into their opiate bath,
And that was something I wanted to ask you about, though, because the biggest struggle I face as a professional working with these people is the treatments are out there and the resources are out there, but getting people to go, especially, like, I'm fortunate in that I work with a lot of minors, and we have that extra ground where we can just involuntarily send them to treatment, which doesn't sound very compassionate, but again, I'd rather force a kid into, inpatient treatment against their will than have them fucking die from their addiction. And it's harder with adults, though, because they can just walk out or just say, no, I'm not going. And it's a lot more difficult. So I was curious kind of what finally pushed you to actually get the help that you needed.
Shit, man. I think just I think it was exhaustion, man. Like, there was a point where I just was exhausted of the routine. My arms were I was spending up to people don't realize this angle too but when your veins you start losing your veins, okay, and it starts getting harder and harder to hit as your your addiction goes on. And like I was spending up to 3 hours poking myself with a needle, and in really painful places, like on my palm, on my big toe, like the top. Think about putting a needle on the top of your big toe, one of those small little tiny veins on the knuckle, like right on the knuckle there.
Yeah.
And it's not fun. And by that point, you spend 3 hours, you have all this blood in your shot. It's probably going to clog up anyways. It's not going to get you high. It's not fun. This is just to feel normal. I have to poke myself 3 hours with fucking needle and full of like rancid blood at this point. It's probably going to make me sick. It sucked, man. I was exhausted, dude. I was ready to die. I was waiting for like, somebody please put me out of my misery. I daydream about someone just like blowing my head off, when I was just walking on the street, it's like, please just put me out. Like, I'm sick of being on this fucking treadmill, and I also hadn't quite given up on myself as a musician and given up on my friends. And luckily, and I don't mean to say luckily as in like, thank God this happened, but like I have gone through like 3 really bad suicides. Like my best friend from my childhood drove himself off a cliff, and then, my sister committed suicide, and Bill, and all those fucked with me like massively. It changed me who I am, and the amount of shit that you put people through when you do something like that, you just don't know how much people care about you. You really don't, and I couldn't do that to people, so I just kept going on. I wouldn't do that, and I was just like, I know the methadone thing is really hard to get off of. I know I'm going to have a really hard time going on tour with this, but I haven't tried it, and I need to do something, and that's why I went.
And so you just walked in. Did you go alone, or did somebody go with you, or what did that look like?
My girlfriend took me, and she got me in there and made sure I was going every day. And
you got to have that support piece is important. You got to have people to keep you accountable to it.
Yeah, that's a key thing too, man. And a lot of adults are missing that in their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and man, it's sometimes I think about things with Bill. It's like Bill had a, I don't want to, slander what he's at. I'm not trying to slander, but like, he had a cocaine problem. He did, man. Like, everybody knew about it, and nobody wants to tell an adult, hey, you gotta stop. You're gonna die. Especially people in like the metal scene where it's like kind of like, no, I'm not gonna say cool to do stuff, but it's like it's normal. You know what I mean? Everyone's doing something, and everyone drinks, and it's hard to spot when it becomes unhealthy. They're just your party buddies, So it's hard to tell people, hey man, you're getting out of line. I kind of wish I had the balls to do it to some of my friends. I wish I'd had talked to Bill about his problem before, and right now I'm facing the same thing. I have a roommate, man. He's literally drinking himself to death. He comes home every night 7 a.m. Barfs in the tub. He broke the toilet the other day. He was so hammered, like fell off the toilet, and the whole thing came off. He lives like he's in a zoo. And then on top of it, he's blackout drunk, and he's sitting there with a keyboard cleaner, huffing keyboard cleaner.
Ugh, Jesus.
Yeah, and nobody will say shit to him. And I think I just I'm sick of it. Finally, I think that, I worked up the courage to I'm going to talk to him this weekend about it, and I think it's hard to do that to your buds though, and no one's accountable for shit. And I think that also creates a problem where people don't talk to you in person about things. Your friends will send you a text when they're mad at you instead of saying something in person.
Yeah.
And it's because it's becoming harder and harder to face people, and people are having less courage when it comes to things like that, man. And because of that, dude, I think people feel more alone, and people don't feel like they have
we become
support.
More detached, more impersonal. I think it's also enabled that thing that you're talking about, that difficulty to talk about these tough topics. I think it's made it even harder. Like it's already hard to have those conversations, but now I think we've enabled ourselves to avoid them even more so. And people are so on edge now about, like, upsetting somebody, offending somebody, making someone upset. But I mean, the bottom line is, when you're dealing with stuff like you're talking about, fuck all that. Like, if it's gonna, like, piss them off, again, I will say better they be, like, mad at you,
Pissed
hate you, and
than
never
dead.
speak to you, but they're alive. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. I'm going.
Yeah, man. Like, that's like totally the thing. It's like, well, I'd rather, have my buddy still be here than passed away.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to. I'm literally buying drumsticks at the minute. I'm doing this too.
No, it's all good, man. And I mean, speaking of Bill too, I had even been kind of like thinking of the idea of having. Yeah, I mean, so many people knew him, and
oh, dude, he was one of the most well-liked dudes in this town.
I almost felt like it would be cool to kind of do, like, sort of a closure, almost like group therapy, like have a bunch of people who knew him on here and kind of just to bring his memory around again and kind of talk through all that stuff.
Well, now, man, I think we're talking about doing maybe like a mini fest.
That would be cool.
In his memory, man. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, well, if we could put some money, I'd like to give his mom some money, like, cause he came from a very blue collar, poor, not super poor, but like a working class, family, like super blue collar, and, it'd be cool, to do something for his family, man, because, they weren't super involved in his life and didn't know the effect that he had on people and how, like, loved that dude was, man. Like, I was talking to Blake about this the other day from Mistium, and, here's another guy with addiction stuff that, I'll get into that in a minute. But like, we were just talking about, like, how there was nobody cooler to tour with, man. Like, he was the funniest fucking dude ever. Like, the dude just, like, had an outrageous sense of humor, and you never had a bad time around him, even if the situation was grim as hell. And, on top of that, like, he also worked his ass off on his drums, you know what I mean? And when he, like, would screw up, like, on a show, he would fix the, like, a lot of people don't fix the problems. They have a hard time just being like, oh man, I actually suck at this thing, and I have to fix it. Like, he wouldn't make you talk to him about having be sucking at a part or sucking at a certain kind of thing. He would always be like fixing himself,
Yeah.
Where I find with musicians, dude, the hardest thing that they have, to do is tell themselves, oh, I'm not the best ever, and I have to work at this still. You know what I mean? Like, that was a really hard thing for Eric, man, from Cobalt. Like, he didn't play in a lot of bands with other people. Everything he did was by himself, so he kind of just was able to kind of tell himself, oh yeah, I'm the best. I don't have to work on anything, and I don't have to adjust anybody's thing, And then when I started playing with him, I was like, oh well, you should really work on your tempo and this, that, the other thing, and he was really bummed out,
Mm-hmm.
He'd never been told, that he had a weak point, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You got to be able to take that. It's important.
Yeah, man. And Billy was always able to take that and, never have a bad attitude towards you for mentioning it. And, he was like, the crazy thing when that happened, man, was like, none of us thought that was the guy who was going to do that, all right? He was like the leader of our group, man. He was like, if ever there was like an alpha male, like, obviously he was the alpha male, but like, you know what I'm saying? We all looked up to him, like, even in like a physical way, like, Billy was a tough dude. Like, he was, like, you didn't fuck with him, you know what I mean? Like, that guy would whoop your ass. And, he kind of looked out for all of us, in a tough town. And, same thing with money, dude. Like, if you needed, like, if he saw you were broke, he wouldn't even have to ask him. He'd just give you $50, Like, and it's weird, you know, have you ever seen your dad cry, John? You ever seen that?
Yeah, it's rare, but I know what you're talking about already.
Yeah, it's a horrifying thing. It's like when you're a kid and you realize the adults aren't always right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it was like when he killed himself, man. It was like, dude, like, if he killed himself and he was the bravest out of all of us, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for the rest of us?
Yeah, it was shattering. Like, it was shattered a whole thing in our heads, man. And not just the dudes in the band, but like people outside of the band saw him like that. You know, in a way he was kind of like, you know, like looked up to by a lot of people, man.
Yeah.
So, you know, and had, you know, how do you talk to a guy like that about their addiction? You know what I mean? How do you tell him that he's out of line? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, especially, I'm sure there are plenty of times too where it's like, well, I could say that, but Bill could just come back and be like, who the fuck are you to tell me about this? Like, y'all are dealing with your own shit.
That's the thing. But you know what? Who better to tell you about it than someone who's going through the same thing? And the same thing, I talked to Blake, you know, a lot of the shit me and Blake talk about is our addiction stuff, man. And it's also like a different thing being an addict as a musician, right? Because historically, people are always like, well, he did his best work when he was high. You know what I mean? Which is an absolute fucking fallacy, you know?
Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing that up. I actually had a question about this specifically, what your thoughts were on that. Because that is such a mentality of so many people is like, oh, yeah, after they got sober, like, they weren't creative anymore, and it, like, totally killed their process.
Bullshit, though. Yeah. That's not true. Dude, like, that's the perception. Okay, look at all the photos from bands, right? Nope, there's never any band members like smiling, doing like fucking like leg lifts and push-ups, all right? They try to make these bands look like as intimidating and unhealthy as possible. Whether you want to believe it or not, heroin is glorified, all right? It is a glorified drug. It is romanticized in the media. Fucking, like, look at a Calvin Klein ad, you know, some scrawny, skinny dude in his underwear in a fucking unkept brick apartment looking like in New York City, and some tiny chick who's like 20 pounds. You know? They look like junkies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like this glamorized Romeo and Juliet suicide type scenario. I think that's kind of like, heroin is the Romeo and Juliet of the drugs. You know what I'm saying? It is the romanticized, you know, creators, you know, nectar of the creator. You know what I mean? Like, it's seen as this like artistic thing unless you've gone through a heroin addiction. Oh, well, you're not a real artist unless you've suffered, you know, which is fucking bullshit also, you know what I mean? And like, there's plenty of suffering besides heroin, you know? Like, heroin is kind of a self-imposed suffering, you know what I mean? It's like going to college, you know, in a sense. It's like you put yourself through it. But you know what I'm saying, John?
I think so. I'm trying to figure it out.
I'm trying to say it like this. I mean it in the way of like when you go to college, you sign up, you pick your classes, you know what you're in for. Like having your parents die, you're thrown into that problem. Mm-hmm. Heroin, you know what's coming to you. You know what I mean? You know what you're getting into, and you probably have the wrong idea about it, though.
Yeah. So so I kind of you've more signed up for it as opposed to it's just something that happens. Yeah,
if we're looking at suffering as something that like you have to go through as an artist, well, it's like signing up for college, then, you know, becoming a heroin addict. You know, but it's like you look at actually what happened in those albums, all right? You know, and from talking to people who like knew Ministry. Ministry's my favorite band ever, right? Talking to people who knew Ministry when they were fucked up. Look, Paul Barker and those guys carried the band. Al was asleep on the couch for most of those sessions. We'll wake up, fucking yell at people for 20 minutes, and pass back out. At the end of the recording session, he would come in, do some finalizing things, come up with some cool vocal patterns and some mixing, and that was it. Most of that record was what he was good at was putting a band together, all right? But most of the musicianship on that record was done by people that weren't high. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's fair.
And
And it wouldn't have come together
dude.
if like all of the patients were in charge of the asylum, so to speak.
Exactly, man. Like, these people have handlers. They're media personalities. The media wants, in a fucked up way. The thing is, and this was what always makes me think about conspiracy theory type shit, is like, but the media wants you to think that you're gonna do better if you're high. It's like they're selling heroin to you by all these little fucking like myths about it. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Like,
conspiracy or not, I mean, just the fact that the people talk in those terms and it's become like spread as this mentality, I think that does ultimately feed into people rationalizing their use and normalizing it and continuing to do that instead of seeking treatment. So whether it's imposed by some like higher force or power or not, like it's definitely having an impact on things that are going on in these bands.
yeah, I mean, for sure, dude. Like, it's like yeah. Anyway, well, hold on a second. Just it's Lake Street, little Lake Street to your right. Sorry, but yeah, it's basically like, you know, fucking. They cover it up. The bands cover it up, and you know what I mean. Like, they'll have you know, he's sick today, so we're gonna have Homeboy do the interview. You know what I mean? And I can tell you from playing Knock Misty, you know what I mean. Like, when Blake was fucked up, he did nothing. You know, like, there was no writing going on, you know, with him when that was all that was happening. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's just like utter bullshit, man. There's no bigger myth than being productive when you're high on heroin. You know what I mean? Even like cocaine and stuff too, man. Like, none of that's gonna make your show better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is all also making me think about, I wanted to go back to sort of what you were saying about Bill too, because it was making me in my head go, okay, so you're in methadone treatment and that's helping a lot. But this is usually where I come in as a counselor in my role, is recognizing that there are some much deeper drivers here that are leading, that are playing a factor in your addiction process.
Man. People are medicating.
Right, but I'm talking about, like, you know, you're dealing with loss, you're dealing with grief, you're dealing with trauma, stuff that predates all these suicides, but now it's being compounded by that stuff. So I was curious, like, what other treatment are you getting besides the methadone? Like, are you seeing a counselor? Are you addressing those things too?
So here's the thing, okay? And this is the thing with I don't know if it's just like, I believe that counseling can help, man. But I think it only helps certain people, okay? I think there's certain people who maybe have a harder time being self-aware and self-reflective. You know, I'm very self-reflective, you know. Throughout the years, it's kind of like I've given myself therapy in a way, you know, like getting to the bottom of thinking, why am I doing these things? And a lot of people just don't think about their fucking actions and why they do them, you know. So I think to those kind of people, like, yeah, man, counselors help. And I guess I shouldn't be so arrogant to say that I would never benefit from it. But I think a counselor, man, is one of those positions where it's like, if you're not a good counselor, you're useless.
That's true. I mean, I'll 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and there's 90% of counselors, maybe 75% of counselors are useless as tits on a nut, you know? And, like, the ones at the methadone clinics seem to be the most useless ones. And most of the time, it really does seem that they are just there to fill the legal obligation of the clinic, and sometimes to make sure that you stay on the fucking methadone. Like, and I really do think, you know, with a lot of times, not in every case, you know, I mean, you don't have to be a former addict to be a counselor for drugs.
No.
But, you know, it's like when I have a guy who was a cocaine addict talking to me about his addiction, we're on different pages. I'm like, man, you get addicted to cocaine because you're partying. You're trying to have fun. All right? Heroin addiction is a totally different thing. And a totally different kind of person in a totally different situation gets addicted to it, you know?
Yeah.
And like, this is another thing why I think heroin addicts shouldn't be like, oh, like, I hate when people are like, junkies, man, I hate junkies. Every junkie should die, you know? And it's like, look, man, most heroin addicts were people who have some severe trauma in their life, right? It's someone who's gone through some terrible shit that needs help. And this is how we can get it, because, you know what I mean? Most people don't know when to go to, oh, well, you gotta go, I'm gonna go to a therapist, or I'm gonna go seek help with this. You know, it's like doctors have failed them, mental health places have failed them. This is where they ended up. They ended up on this shit, you know? And it helps out sometimes. I honestly think, man, when I first got on it and stuff for the first 3 years, dude, it helped me. It really
there's
did.
a reason why people start using it and keep using it. I mean, it serves a purpose. I'll say, like, it's an adaptive thing where, again, and I've said before too, I had a head injury at one point and they pumped me full of morphine, and morphine's only like one chemical removed from heroin.
Yeah,
and as soon as I felt that feeling,
heroin.
I remember when they pumped me full of morphine, I was like, oh, I get it. Like I could totally see why people get down with this stuff. Like
it's funny,
it feels
man,
good.
A lot of people say that, and a lot of people say the opposite, because like, people don't know that, like, heroin is not one of those things that makes you feel awesome right off the bat. It's going to make you puke. Like, the first time you do heroin, you're probably going to throw up and get real sick, right? It's not like a party drug, right? People, like, I always get my counselors always, like, asking, like, so, are you going to be able to go on tour? You going to be able to handle on the road when you're partying? I'm like, I'm sorry, but partying doesn't have anything to do with fucking heroin, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not like, ooh, good time, let's shoot up, guys, and go to sleep. You know, like, it's not like, hey, I'm going to a Fish concert, let's shoot up and go to sleep and miss the show. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I agree with that, and at the same time, I think what I see and what research has showed too is that, like, you're right, it's not like that, but it could be that, like, you have a lot of resolve right now. You have a lot of personal resolve to stick to your treatment and, you know, do what you need to do, keep on your methadone, make sure that you're doing everything that's going to keep you on the path to sobriety. But if you are on tour and you start drinking, and the drinking is associated with the partying, it's not going to be, oh, let's party some more and use heroin. It's more so when you're drinking, some of that resolve starts to go down and disappear. And now you're less likely to stop yourself. And when you're in, like, maybe the party's over now, you're back, you're ready to go to bed or whatever, and those old thoughts creep up of like, man, it would be really good to get high right now. And whereas when you're sober, you might be more likely to be like, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to do that. If you're, you know, if you've been drinking for a while, you're more likely to be like, yeah, fuck it, whatever.
See, I tell you, here's where drinking would trigger somebody. It would only, if at least for my case, I mean, if I drank a bunch, I wouldn't be like, man, I should go get a bag now. Because usually I don't think about heroin when I'm happy or like having a good time or with my buds. I think about it when I'm sad and miserable and I've given up on myself. And I feel like my career is a wash and I failed my parents and I failed myself. That's when I feel like getting a bag and numbing out. You know? And I'd say that I think it would trigger me, though, if the next morning I was hungover. And I was like, man, fuck, I got hammered last night. I feel like shit. You know, I got to go to work. Fuck, man, I wish I could, you know, well, I know a bag will get rid of my hangover. I won't have a fucking headache at least. That's when I would use. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, and it sounds weird to people because it sounds like, well, sounds like he's getting a Tylenol, you know? And actually, really, what is so bad about taking something to make yourself feel better? You know? And really, man, like, the only thing that fucked me with heroin was the fact that, you know, when it crossed over into IV use, first of all, you know, like, I snorted this shit for years, man. And if I could have afforded the habit, you know, like, I probably would have never shot up because I started shooting up because it was economical, you know?
Yeah.
And, like, basically, I used it to when I would go on tour, and my leg would hurt, you know, or my back would be fucked up, you know, from my back problems, and like I would play better, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. There's no problem with the drug. The problem is how much it costs. You know what I mean? Like, and that you're not and that you can't cope with reality. You know what I mean? Like those two things. Like it's like a weird thing. Like there's so many more things that I think are more addictive than heroin. That like like you can get into a routine of anything, right? Okay, so like let's say that you get your morning coffee every day. You don't feel like it's gonna, if you don't have your morning coffee, oh man, I'm screwed. I didn't have my morning coffee, and then you think about it like constantly until you get it. Are you a coffee drinker?
Yeah, totally. And I know what you're talking about. Like just that whole, I mean, people do it with exercise. People do it with smoking. Especially the more there's like a ritual around it too, like the worse. Yep. Like I got super hooked on, I vaped for a while. But I always joke that like it was before it was cool. This was back when you could only get like a kit either online or at like a gas station for like a ridiculous cost, and all the cartridges sucked. But anyways, like back then it was almost like I would joke like it was my little like sniper kit, or even like a heroin kit, really, because you had to like open up the case and you had the battery and you had the cartridge. You had to like fill up the cartridge and then you had to screw all the pieces together, and there was like a whole process behind it. And that really, when you do that over and over again,
it more addictive too, right there. Yeah. That whole thing of like unscrewing down. I'm gonna put my cloth down. I'm gonna put this piece. It's like putting a gun together, like those scenes in Commando.
Yep, it was literally like that. And when you do that routine over and over, it really gets like, it fucks with your head. Like it gets stuck in there, and then your brain like remembers that like, oh, it's time to do all that stuff. And the more routine it is, like, and even smaller stuff too. Like when I used to smoke and drive, that was the hardest thing to quit, because every time I got in the car, my brain was like, it's time to have a cigarette. It's like, it's programming. It's crazy how your body gets, but that's literally what it is. It's wiring. Like you formed, it's just like learning an instrument or playing a sport, I say. Like the more you do something over and over again, the more you develop like muscle memory for it. That's how like NBA players become so good, is they're doing it all the time. And it's the same way. If you are over and over and over again associating things, you're building literal connections in your brain that are making that like an automatic process. And thus now every time you get in your car, your brain's automatically,
you want a cigarette.
Yep, it's time. Like it's just ready for it. And that's what's so tricky about things, especially like heroin or methamphetamine, is that they are shown to particularly rewire the brain in a very physical way. And so it's not even, it's the routine, but also being aided by those specific chemicals are like really hardwiring these pathways, and at that point it becomes less of, oh, I just need to change my routine, like that's part of it, but now like you're like chemically hooked on it.
In its way, John, this is a strange thing I'm going to say probably, but it connects to the esoteric also, man, and like ritual, right? You know, word ritual, it's esoteric word, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it really is like these things are a curse that were put on us, all right? Because it's that rewind your brain, the esoteric nature of repetitiveness and hypnosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all these things have to do with programming, you know? And it is like, you know, doing something like this product that was put there from this plant that, you know, is aided by the fact that it's going to be like some repetitive thing that you do, and it's going to change your brain a certain way, you know what I mean? It to me is like the essence of like a curse, you know? It's basically like you've been hexed, you know what I mean?
And it's a strange way to put it. I see a song forming here potentially.
I mean, it's weird. Dude, I've had this weird thing. I started like seeing the world in a different way in the last 6 months. I don't know what triggered it, man, but something made sense all of a sudden with like all this like esoteric reading that I've kind of been doing, and like on these YouTube binges, you know what I mean? Which sounds really stupid, watching conspiracy videos on YouTube. But it's not really the conspiracy things or anything. It's the idea of shit like, repetition and intentional hypnosis through repetition and intent, all these things, that things are, there's a lot of intention in the world that we don't see as intention, we just see as nature. But I think there's things that are intended, man, like drugs, like that methamphetamine shit. I think there is an intentional, like, kind of hex that has to do with it, you know? This product was put out there to curse you. in a sense, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like there is something bigger at play, man, that I don't see the full picture, and that we don't get the full picture. And it's if we saw it, we would think it's so ludicrous that we would think it was fake anyways. You know what I mean? If someone told us what was really going on, we'd be like, oh, you're fucking out of your mind. And sometimes I think all these crazy people, like, who are saying, like, some far-off shit, like, well, maybe they know. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm just insane now, too. You know? It's hard to gauge, isn't it? You know what I mean? That doubt is one of those things that really is like, you know, doubt. It's a funny thing, man, and it can unravel a lot, you know, like planting one seed of doubt, man. It's just like, I don't know, man. Addiction, like in America, really it has to do with like doing things to get out of our fucking miserable state. People are miserable, and I think it's like intentionally fucked up that, like, you know, like, where everyone's looked down upon for being an addict in the state of how things are in this country. And especially, like, you know, heroin's always been a blue-collar thing. How could we look down on someone that's the blood of the machine, pretty much? Blue-collar people are the blood that makes this fucking system work, right? They are the worker. They're the oil in the machine, you know, and they're pulling the gears and cogs. The guy, think about some guy, since he's 30 years old, has a kid, right? And his wife and kid are at home. He's going to put his body through hell in some steel mill till he's 60 and he can retire to put his kid through college to make his wife happy. And the only thing that maybe makes him feel better is taking a couple Vicodins when he gets home. That's an addiction. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Do we treat him like shit? Well, not if he's doing Vicodin, no. But if he's doing heroin, same fucking thing. Well, then we're going to treat him like an asshole because he wants to feel better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's ultimately what's under all this is the need to feel good and not feel like shit.
Yeah, it's all that emotional pain and the trauma.
But what's so wrong with that? You know what I mean? Why do we look down on people that don't want to feel like crap?
I
is
think
it like they have to pay penance? Do they have to suffer? Why can't people use drugs? You know what I mean?
I think there's some of that. I mean, that's such a big question that we could probably spend another like 2 hours just talking through that. But I mean, I think there is some of that. I think there is like still a lot of old school thinking that like people need to pay the price for their behavior. There's some, you know, like religious factors for some people. There's also, there's also, you know, there's a societal price too. Like I talked to you last time about how we have this like ridiculous meth crisis here right now, especially among the homeless population. And you better believe it's not a situation where it's like, oh, well, they're only hurting themselves. It's like, no, they're doing some damage now at this point. Yeah, like they're not messing around. They're stealing. They're, you know, engaging in violent crime. They're the rates of sexual assault in those homeless camps are out of control.
Oh God, that's the one thing with meth too. People don't realize is that it gets you insanely horny. So
it
not
causes,
only you're running around with a crazy boner, like fucking, like, you know. So a mentally ill dude on meth, a mentally ill, raging, horny dude who's got zero money and nothing to lose. That's terrifying. Yeah,
no, it's no good. So I mean, all of that plus many other things in answer. But I wanted to get to like what you were really talking about though is, I mean, it's so hard to attack this problem from the standpoint of like getting rid of the drugs, because that's like almost an impossible task. And like for anything that we get off, like, I mean, we went through that here too. Actually, I was reading a whole report of like, at one point just a couple of years ago, the police went through and like knocked down all the local meth houses, and they put in like those laws in place where you couldn't buy like too much of the medications and stuff like
the Sudafed?
Yeah, Sudafed from like the stores, and for a while that worked. But then the like Mexican drug cartels got wind of the fact that there was you know, supply and demand, man. Like they recognized that they had an in, because now it was like a dry county and it's just like prohibition. Like, hey, we can make some money off of this. So now we've got all this stuff getting smuggled up through the border. And on top of that, it's so cheap. Like people can get, you know, their fix for $5. So that's just like, you know, panhandling for just a little while, and they're ready to, go to the moon. So my point is going back to what we were talking about the deeper issue here is that why are the people using? And a lot of these people are using because they're in pain, they're angry, they're bitter about life, they've been through a bunch of trauma. And so like that's what I'm trying to like get down on is how do we help people with that? How do we get these people in treatment to deal with those underlying factors? How do we make sure that we're helping our young people with that before they become addicts? And how do we get these people
We
off
have to
the
fix
street?
the treatment first, I think. Here, let me tell you something. We have to fix the way treatment's done first. Because honestly, man, the methadone treatment, I mean, I think it's fucked up. All right? Basically, I pay money to be on parole. And no matter what they tell you, you know it. You're treated like it's a punishment when you're there. Even though you voluntarily went in there and you're paying out of your pocket. It's a fucking punishment. There's an undertone of punishment to it all, and there's an undertone of giving up your pride and your ability to control your own life, man. Where you basically are like, all right, treat me like a baby and put me on some stupid thing, give me a gold star when I don't use drugs. It's really fucked up, man. How they treat adults at these places, dude.
Well, and it's not enough. I mean, and that I agree with you so much in what you said about. There's so many counselors out there who don't do a good job, and I feel like that's any career. But God knows I interact on a regular. Like I've become so cynical in my work because basically we'll get kids that like the specialist will tell me, oh yeah, like their documentation shows that they already had like trauma treatment at their last facility, and I'm like, look into it. Like, see, like, because I just don't trust other people to do a good job, and I can't count how many times that they didn't. Like, they didn't actually get anything evidence-based.
On the paper, yeah.
Yeah. And so we're a program that's very focused on, like, formal treatment models that are evidence-based that I've been using for, like, 8+ years now, and making sure, and I get to see the results. Like when you get somebody in the right program and you get them with a specialist who knows what they're doing, knows the treatment models, is utilizing like best practices like TFCBT or EMDR, things that are shown to actually work, you can see some massive results. So I think one of the major steps there is just getting more people formally trained in all these programs and keeping them in. The other thing too is just keeping them in the system long enough to really get good at it. And the problem there is pay.
Not paid enough. Yeah. I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
The incentive, dude. And also, we don't have respect for these people in our society. There's not respect for teachers. There's not respect for people that become counselors. These are people that are seen as like, oh, that's some hippy-dippy person. This is a cutthroat world. And when you tell people it's a cutthroat world, you make it a cutthroat world. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You're going to make them think it is, and then they're going to act like assholes and make it a cutthroat world, and it's all going to be fucked. And like, dude, it's the bottom. It's from the bottom up in this country, dude. The whole thing that needs to get wiped clean. Our thinking, our way that we treat musicians and people that actually, like, the fact that, like, I get to, it's like, that always bothers me with my brother, who's like a fucking piece of shit, like, loan banker, you know what I mean? Like, what do you call it? Like a payday loan guy, makes tons of money. But I'm like, he's got so much respect from everyone in the family. I'm always like, dude, like, what does he really do? The money that you're messing with is not even real. It's numbers on a computer. You fuck with numbers on a computer, put it from this thing to that thing, and you make it really hard for somebody to live. That's what, in essence, you are doing, and you make it easy for you to live. You basically are taking from one guy, putting it in your pocket through some network of computer and manipulation, all right? That is what you're doing. It doesn't make the world a better place. It makes the world a worse place. And, like, that kind of guy gets tons of respect in society. Now, somebody who spends his life learning an instrument, creating a craft, and putting on a record that people get a high value out of and makes their lives better, well, fuck him. He shouldn't get anything. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just bananas, man.
Well, it's frustrating, too, because there's those people, and then there's also a whole slew of people who think that they're helping the problem, who legitimately, like, come up with things that sound like great solutions. Like, case in point right now. I was talking to, I know some people like higher up in the police over here in Portland, and I was asking them about this whole like Andy No situation that was going on, where that reporter
What's the Andy No?
got
the
reporter that got beat up by the Antifa people. A lot of people are blaming the mayor, who's also the police commissioner, and myself included. But I know personally a person in particular who was able to give me a little bit more of a inside scoop. And basically, the problem is actually more so rooted in issues with the ACLU. Because what happened was that they had a bunch of basically frivolous lawsuits set against them with the support of the ACLU, where the ACLU was basically saying that they were like engaging in civil rights violations, and the police force in Portland was becoming militarized. And they ended up, the state of Portland and the police force ended up losing a bunch of these lawsuits, and that's pretty costly, and that brings up a lot of liability issues. So really what's kind of happening now is that they're really trying to basically appease the ACLU and other local organizations to show that they're acting in good faith, and as a result, though, they're less able to do their job. And they can't push through common sense stuff. Like the mayor actually tried to push through a law that these people couldn't wear masks, which doesn't fix everything, but I see as like a great small solution, because these people, let's face it, don't have the balls to go out and do these things that they're doing without a mask on.
No, like it empowers them.
Yeah, most of them we will see a massive decrease, I believe, in these types of unsafe situations with that alone. But they weren't able to push it through. Like it got shot down because of mostly kind of like do-gooder people who, again, have good intentions. Like they're just they feel like they're looking out for the people and trying to make sure they're not being like, abused by their police, which is a noble cause. But at the same time, ultimately, it's making it worse for everyone. Like we're seeing a massive escalation in all the stuff that's going on.
Portland's the front line in all this stuff, man. It really is. And it's scary, man, because I really do see like almost like a Civil War type atmosphere rising up, and it's starting in like that community over there, you know what I mean? And like it's fucked up, man. And like you forget, man, like everyone's got like some crazy right-wing uncle anyways, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like not every cop's a piece of shit, right? There's a lot of pieces of shits that are cops, but like not all of them, you know, man. Like I think just the attitude that like, you know, these pigs, you know, it's like, look, man, a lot of these people got into this because they want to help people. You know, some people got into it because they like power, they like bullying people. That's true also. And, you know, you're being just as much of an asshole if you don't treat them on a case-by-case situation too. You know what I mean? Yep. And it's like, if you don't live that way,
too much generalization.
It is, dude. And the people on the left are doing it just as much as the people on the right. And then the people in the middle are being forced to go either way because they're not being allowed to because if they say anything that like has any kind of like, you know, sway to be like, well, the people on the right, you know, maybe they're not so, he's on the right, you know. It's like before you even get a sentence out, man, you know, it's like it's the same thing how I've felt with this whole thing, man. You know, like anything I say that's against in the slightest regards, man. Like the shit with the, you know, I'm not sure what happened with the relapse thing with the Talcross dudes, man. But like, you know,
that shit's weird. I'm just staying out of it pretty much. I'm like, I don't know these people. I don't know what's going on. I know
Away's been like Away's been like a guy who stuck up for like social justice since the fucking 80s, man. So I was like, what the fuck is going on? I had something to do with Holocaust Night, which is like, if you're Holocaust Night, you're mentally ill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're just like a mentally ill dude. But I don't know, man. I think they should like at least talk about what the whole story is before just like throwing it. Because I always thought Meadix was a pretty like social justice kind of a band, you know? But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know the history of Meadix is good enough. But I always thought that guy was pretty like, you know, cruel dude, like against Nazis and shit. You
know? I don't know enough about it. I've got another episode. Well, actually, it'll already be out by the time we air this one.
Yeah, getting off topic. I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. Like, I mean, this comes up quite a lot because it's heavy on people's minds. But with the time we do have left, I do want to kind of ground back to. I wanted to push back a little bit on what you said about treatment's good for some people, not everyone. I do agree, like, not everybody maybe needs formal stuff because they have other protective factors in their life that are, like, allowing them to, get the healing that they need. But one thing I will throw in there, going back to the idea of, like, repetition and brain being restructured and stuff, what I've discovered in, doing a decade of, like, trauma treatments, especially with young people, is that most of these people, it's not your stereotypical, like, if they're dealing with PTSD, it's not like in the movies where they have like flashbacks and cold sweats and nightmares.
Not
and
at
it's
all.
like really
Not
clear.
at
Like
all.
a lot of these people don't recognize the extent of how much their body has been like unconsciously rewired to have these fight or flight responses, basically. And a big part of my work has been, I'd say, with like 75% or maybe even more of these clients and their families, helping them understand that, like, yeah, look, I know you can like walk me through your trauma word for word and like say, oh yeah, it doesn't really bother me. But the thing is, like, just like with when you get in the car and you just feel that need to have the cigarette, there are certain situations you walk into that your body is now hardwired to go into fight or flight mode. And now, like, you're on attack, you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling anger, you're acting in ways that are getting you in trouble and that are really messing up your situation. It's also driving you more so to medicate that with drugs and alcohol and whatever. And so I think I want to make sure people recognize that, like, even though it may not seem like you've got that stereotypical like PTSD response, your body can be unconsciously wired to have these type of responses. And the only way to fix that is to get with a therapist who knows what they're doing, like, and understands all that stuff and can provide the proper type of treatment. But I've been able to see the results with that, and it's super rewarding when you see it. But it can be like finding those people.
I agree with you, man. I agree with you on that. I also think the same thing. It's just I feel like. Do you think that the like screening process for counselors is going even lower these days because of the demand?
I don't. Actually, I'd say things are actually getting better. I'd say it's on the upswing. Like, I particularly see that in that, like, I do new employee trainings whenever we get new counselors in. And it used to be, even just like probably 2 years ago, that I would do a trauma-informed training talking about all this brain chemistry stuff. And I would, at the very beginning, ask people like, hey, do you know what like the hand model of the brain is? How many people know what that is? And nobody would raise their hand. And now, just, a year after that, and now 2 years in, when I ask that same question with that same training, almost everyone raises their hand every time. So I feel like people are getting the training's getting updated, school curriculum's getting updated, people are learning more about these things. Keeping that sustained, though, and over the long term, and again, making sure that these people are reimbursed properly enough that they stay in the system is still a problem. But I'm hopeful that I feel like things are overall getting better as opposed to getting worse. Although it may not always feel
it's good to hear. It's good to hear from someone in the system that thinks like some kind of positive change going on.
Yeah, man, it's there. It's harder to see because, I mean, part of the problem too, and this came up when I was talking to the guy in the police too, is that people report on all of the negative stuff and they don't report on the positive stuff. And he was able to tell me some very tangible things that they have been working on to improve these problems. And I'm like, I haven't heard about any of that stuff. And he's like, well, that's the way the press is. Like, it's not sexy.
No one says anything positive. Exactly. Like, negative shit is what people put in the papers. It makes people read. Yeah. And that's another thing. Like I'm saying, everything's based on the dollar. So just like, hey, 30% chance of rain, only bullshit in the news. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
sucks.
it's in that, it sucks. We're always on edge. And
to me, that's one of the biggest problems too. Like,
absolutely.
Potentially the biggest.
Think about how giant of a problem that is to our consciousness, man.
Yeah, we're all in this
always at
constant
war.
state now of malaise. It feels like the world is ending every day, and it's not.
It's
not.
It's an apocalypse. It's self-inflicted apocalypse.
Yeah.
We're basically driving ourselves into the fucking apocalypse that we're fucking lying about.
I'm trying to actively combat that by, again, like, I'm trying to have more positive messages coming through even on like this podcast, and also posting things that are actually positive. Like there's a TED Talk I really like where I forget the guy's name, but he's like a famous like researcher or something. And he walks through statistically how actually things right now are better than they ever have been, even though it doesn't feel that way. And he's able to use like actual evidence to show all that. I'm like, we need more of this. Like we need more of recognizing just how good we have it, even though it seems like, you know, it's going to be the end with every waking minute.
And also, man, like you're like, dude, it's nowadays too, man. And this is definitely apparent in our scene. And like, is that like people are uncomfortable being positive, man. It takes a lot more confidence to be positive than to like be an Nancy Eeyore kind of character. Like you have to be a lot more sure of yourself to be positive. And like I'm making a conscious effort, man. Like in a way, I feel shitty about some of the releases. That's shitty, but I'd say I just feel like I've wasted a chance to give a message out in music, man. Like sometimes where I've used it for my therapy in a sense. It's not really forcing a message, so I guess that, you know, I shouldn't really feel bad about it, but like I definitely want my records to empower people to feel fucking strong. That's basically what I want to do with music, man. If hey man, like if there's a message I would like to get through, I definitely don't want to like sing about like getting through being a heroin addict, but more just like fucking dude, we all have the power to control our fucking lives, man.
Yeah.
Like, and being a victim's not is it's not cool. It's not cool, and it's not something you want. And you don't want to blame people for anything. You know, you taking responsibility for your shit, man, and being the driver of your life, and not blaming shit on the government, not blaming shit on how things are, not blaming shit on the fucking market or your parents. Taking responsibility for your own fucking life, man. That's the only way you'll be happy and you're gonna get better, man. I think in metal in general, there's just a general lack of that attitude.
Yeah. I couldn't have put it better.
And with if you with that attitude, people think you're right wing. Like people think I'm right wing based on that. You know what I mean? And it's like I'm not. I think
it's like that didn't used to be considered a conservative ideology, but like it is now. It's like, oh, well, what about the people who like they can't do that? And it's like, fuck that. Anyone can do that. It's like, yeah, we're all born into different circumstances. Yeah, exactly. We're all born into different circumstances, and some of us get better cards to start with than the other, but you can always have that, you know, attitude, perspective of, okay, how am I going to take what I've been given and make it the absolute best thing that I can?
And it's never too late, man. It's never too late to take that idea, man, dude. Like, you know, like, dude, freaking, you know, and this is one reason why I look up to Dylan from India and love that dude so much, is that dude had a fucking massively insane fucking history. And he didn't really start doing music till his late 20s. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, what I think is one of the finest doom bands in the world. And, like, it's never too late to fucking to start some shit, you know? Like, there's always time, man. And, you know, like, it's all right to be positive. You're not a dork if you fucking smile, you know? Have a sense of humor. Fucking laugh at things. It's okay. You know, like, that's how you show people your friends. Make fun of them. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I just feel like there's so much. We're all being basically trained to act like Olive Garden waiters.
Doesn't all have to be dark and dreary and like that. Well, yeah. That's why I've mentioned this before, but that's why like the Artisan Era has like their own Facebook group. And it's like it's like the total opposite of the metal stereotype. Like it's like the bands and their fans all together, like making fun of each other, memeing on each other, like being lighthearted, making stupid jokes, being corny, being positive. And it's like this doesn't have to be super serious. Like we can build a community that like where we can laugh and smile and have fun and have a good time and make sick heavy music at the same time.
Absolutely, man. You know, I got one closing statement, I guess, because I got a jet here. I'm standing in front of my drum set, and I'm like, oh yeah, got a crush. first off, man, I love you, John. Thank you for having me on here. Anytime.
Always a pleasure, man, and anytime. And like
dude,
I said, if you want to get like the whole
yeah.
band in here too and have a conversation, I'm always down for that. I know it's hard to coordinate all those schedules.
Well, you might have a chance with Drew. Drew's in town this weekend, so maybe you can have him on too. But anyways, like I just want to tell everybody, listen, man, like whether you like my music or not, we're all in this shit together. We're all doing this music stuff, man, in the heavy music scene. Just like, don't lose sight of we're all brothers in this. And even if there's a little friendly competition in the scene, it's think about all inclusiveness as all inclusive. Everybody, whatever their idea is, when they're at the show, it don't matter unless they're starting some bullshit. They're welcome. I don't care who they are. They're welcome here. Ex-con, whatever. Fucking some dude who was stealing cars all his life, whatever. You're welcome here, man. As long as you're going to be part of this brotherhood. And, man, like, it's just like, just be there for people, man. I'm always here to talk to, if you guys, like I said, whether you like my music or not, man, you ever any questions for me you listen to this podcast, you want to talk some more about stuff, hit me up on Facebook, dude. Like, people are always willing to talk, man, if you give them a chance to talk and you want another opinion. Just don't lynch people before they get to have a chance to defend themselves, because I feel like at that point you're being an asshole, But anyways, just I love all you guys, man. All you stupid metal people, love all you. And
that's right, more love.
Just be good to people and love as many people as you can. It's really what it's all about, man.
Yeah.
Anyways, John, that's all I had to say in the closing thing, But thanks for having me on. And anytime you want,
Yeah, cool, man. Until next time.
All right. Until next time. Later, bud.
All right, later. And that'll do it for this episode of Trench Talk. Always a pleasure to have Charlie on. Hope to have him on for years to come. And I'm really excited once again to hear what all these different bands are cooking up with him, doing his thing. Because God knows it adds a lot. And just cool guy to talk to as well. But in any case, as always, please do subscribe if you enjoyed. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Again, like even just $1 a month, like makes a huge deal. This site basically makes negative money right now because I've got to pay into like the Buzzsprout account to keep the episodes up, and I even expanded it so I could make longer episodes and they'd actually store them. And so I end up having to pay into all that. So even just enough to cover the cost to do that and get us back to zero would be amazing. And there are some kind of extra perks there. I'll probably tweak that more so in the future. But follow us on social media. We're on everything. We're even on Minds.com and Vero. And even better than that, sign up for the email list, because I send out an email every Friday. And that's the easiest, most direct way to make sure you don't miss anything. Because God knows social media algorithms are trash and they kind of deprioritize all of our stuff, and half the time you don't even see it unless you're constantly commenting and liking and engaging with our page. But yeah, follow us everywhere. This podcast is available on iTunes, CastBox, and also on YouTube, and there are other videos and content on the YouTube channel, so definitely subscribe there as well. And I think that about covers it. So without dragging on too long, Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.